Yes, good afternoon. I am Terry Wisdom, and I am your host for Harlem Network News. And Harlem Network News is a new media platform. We started at the onset of COVID, and it has just been quite a journey. We do have a very special guest here with us today, which I think you saw a little sneak peek. We have Dr. Keith Taylor with us, and I'm going to let him intro you, but we'll be speaking about 911 that is coming up. But going back to the 20th anniversary of 911, but going back to Harlem Network News, we are a new media platform. We started at the onset of COVID, and it has been quite a journey, quite a year. We knew that a Harlem Network News was important to bring information to Harlem and Harlems of the world. But this extraordinary year has shown us even more, journeying through Black Lives Matter and just really the assassination of many Blacks and, the community questioning it. We had a March on Washington last year. And this year we commemorated the 58th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's March on Washington with a march for getting on the voting rights. And so it's a very, very significant time. We came through an election. We have a new president, the first Black woman vice president. So many, many things have happened, an insurrection in Washington, inauguration, so many things, but COVID is still here. And now we have the COVID variants. And in a period of 2 weeks, we've had two pretty major and significant hurricanes. So knowledge is power, and Harlem Network News is the voice and the drumbeat of Harlem. So without further ado, I do want to introduce our Honorable Dr. Keith Taylor, who was so kind to be with us today. And before we go further, I just do want to send our prayers and condolences to all those that have lost relatives to COVID or anything else, and especially in the Northeast, we lost 50 people in a hurricane. So there's a lot going on, and we really are being tested. And I know we're strong and we can withstand the test. So Dr. Taylor, if you would just introduce yourself and tell us all of your pedigree and your connection specifically to 911. Thank you so much as we approach this Labor Day for really taking the time out and joining us. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. I am humbled and grateful for such a wonderful introduction. My family roots are in Harlem. My family came to Harlem in 1905 from Barbados, and I love Harlem. And one of the things that I was fortunate to do was I'm going to skip a lot of different things and just focus on the police work because
okay,
I think that's most relevant.
Okay, thank you.
I started in law enforcement in 1991 and was a beat officer. I was an undercover narcotics detective. And then I became a sergeant in internal affairs and then the detective bureau. And in the detective bureau, I was a supervisor in the missing person squad. The missing person squad's main role is to handle identification of victims during mass casualty incidents, of which 9/11 was certainly counted as that. So I reported to work on that day, and it was a very uneventful day, a beautiful morning, and I was at 1 PP, 1 Police Plaza, which is close to the Trade Center attack, and then saw out of my window the first attack, and then the second plane that went in made the police executives evacuate the One Police Plaza because they didn't know if that was going to be a target next.
Okay.
And my detectives and I went down to West and Bessie Street, where there was a triage set up for the injured. The buildings were both standing at that time. This was directly across the street from the first one that fell. And by the time we got there, about a minute, 45 seconds, a minute after we arrived, the first one went down. And so that was a harrowing experience. I saw black smoke coming towards me, and there wasn't any place you could really run to. There wasn't enough time. But fortunately, I survived that. But I lost some of my detectives. I didn't know where they were.
Oh, wow.
Which was very, very disturbing. And by the end of the day, we'd all been reunited, but it was that was disturbing.
What a blessing.
Within that whole tragedy. Seeing all of the devastation, the human lives lost, it was really an incredulous experience. I don't have words to experience the horror. Hearing the thump, the big bang on the ground, and know that another human life was lost. Knowing that we were powerless to help people, and that's why I joined the police department. And so that day, department reconvened, and we set up our operations at the morgue on 30th and First Avenue. And I spent from 9/11 to May 30th at that location, supervising forensic detectives who were trying to identify the victims and bring solace to their families. And so that was what I did. That was my experience during that time. And I did other things in the police department. I was going to go into computer crimes prior to 9/11, and then afterwards I went into counterterrorism, and I ended up on the SWAT team and a federal FBI WMD task force, and did some things in that arena. I got a second master's in national security studies from Naval Postgrad School.
Wow.
And really worked on making sure that as a community, as a city, as a country, that we were safe from terrorism efforts, wherever it may have originated, foreign or domestic.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. And as I said, certainly it's more than an honor that you are here on Harlem Network News, and that the Harlem Network News audience can hear your story. And also just the fact, I'm Terry Wisdom, and for those of you who are just joining, this is Harlem Network News. And certainly we have one of our Harlem heroes on with us, and of course, New York City and a national hero. But I always love, because here at Harlem Network News, we're doing many things. So it's very important to hear the stories, the success stories of folks that are from Harlem and what the journey was, because I think that it really helps and shows our young people what folks can do. And also, even being a person of the media, I'm very clear that a lot of times, if we don't have a parent that was in that field, sometimes these are fields that no one even knows that they could enter. So when you're talking, and I want to hear, I want to hear a lot about the 911 story. And I also want to just say to some of our younger audiences, if you could just share, and I think you can probably share it better than I can, the fact that in the year 2000, here in New York City, we call it 911 for two reasons. 911 is where you call if there's an emergency and the police or the ambulance come to help you. But 911 was also the date that we actually had, I would say, a form of war and attack on America. So if you could just share, Dr. Taylor, what is 911 and what happened? Because there are people listening to Harlem Network News that were not even born during 911. And when I'm saying 2000, I know that my granddaughter, who is now a senior at Howard University, she was a year
Right.
old. Yes. Oh, yes. HBCU all the
You
way.
know?
You know, that's right. And my grandson is a freshman.
All
So
right.
and my
That's
children both
wonderful.
attended, and I
Excellent.
attended Lincoln
Yes.
University in Pennsylvania. So we're
All right.
all right there.
Another strong
Oh,
HCBU
yes. Oh,
or
yes. Oh,
HBCU.
yeah. HBCU. Yeah, we get our
Yes.
little acronyms. But in any case, if you would just share, because it's hard as people look back in history, and this is recent history, for them to understand what happened at 911, what is 911. And, you know, even those of us who were there may not actually be clear. We just know, and I'll let you take it from there, that two buildings came down and a plane went through each one. And one of them we saw live on television. And I will quote my schoolmate and Lincoln University grad, is like, the revolution will not be televised, but in this instance, it was. So if you would just share, I'd be very grateful.
Not only was it televised, but it was preserved for
Okay.
history. And in that all over the world, it was the attack that was known. It was almost like the shot heard around the world many years prior that caused a war during that time period. 9/11, the World Trade Center attack, and the attacks on the other areas of the country that occurred. I, you know, the geopolitical nature of it. There were people in other part of the world, and they wanted to send a message to this country in a terrorist way, which is at its most simplest definition, using violence to create political change in a way that is that affects individuals who are not professional soldiers. So New York City is not an army. The people that worked in World Trade Center were not soldiers. They were civilians, and they were simply going to work and doing what they normally did in their lives. So when that hit the city, it was I think the entire country was in a state of shock that it occurred.
Absolutely.
The seeing thousands of people die before their eyes was traumatic, and I think that it generated a resolve to change the way that we as a country prepared for disasters, both of that type, terrorists, as well as naturally occurring disasters. And we've been through a couple of hurricanes. We've
Yes.
been through a number of domestic terrorism incidents through the years, mass shootings.
Yes.
And one of the ways that the country reacted was by creating the Department of Homeland Security, and through that created training for the first responders to learn the same information about how to deal with emergency incidents. They created something called National Incident Management System. I taught that to municipalities throughout the country on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security for years. And it was a certainly a measure of what the deficiencies were that led up to that. The intelligence community was not sharing information or talking to it. National, federal, state, local entities were not sharing information, not working well. And it was that not sharing of information that made it difficult for us to respond in a way, in a preventative manner, to stop that the World Trade Center attack from occurring. So we learned a lot as a country from that incident. We also saw the resiliency of people.
Yes,
to
absolutely.
come together, to work towards a common goal, to care about each other, to look beyond the differences that we bring to this beautiful mosaic of this country, to look beyond the differences that keep us apart. They were able to see us as Americans first, and then deal with the differences, you know, in a reasonable way. It seems that since that time, things have been somewhat changed so that we look at each other by our differences first, and as Americans as a secondary factor. Some may not look at each other as Americans.
Mhm.
So I think it's important that the lesson that we learned is that we will definitely fail as a country if we do not respect each other and take care of each other and make certain that you know, all of our needs are being met as communities, as citizens, and that we need to rely on each other to make certain that our community is safe. And I think the pandemic is a reaffirmation of that, because
Absolutely.
it was a catastrophic, had a catastrophic impact on our country, where it was not just an acute situation in a specified geographic area, it was global, and economies were changed as a result. Whole types of industries were severely changed as a result of that.
As we sit in Zoom and we meet
Yeah.
virtually, yeah.
Right, and I think
Continue.
we have to prepare, and we have to learn how to manage these types of large scale incidents, because I think that's what we can anticipate in the future. We see that in the global climate changes and its effect on us locally. As you mentioned in the beginning of this broadcast, that we
Yes.
lost 50 people
Yeah.
locally,
Yeah.
unexpectedly,
Yeah. Yes.
because we were not prepared. So
Right.
one of the things that is really important is that we understand the need to adopt and change our practices to be better. We can't simply rely on past success. We have to constantly look at how we can do things better, what we possibly could not have anticipated or imagined when we are looking at you know, any large scale incident, whether terrorist, man-made or naturally occurring.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing and also connecting everything, because everything is connected. It's a very holistic thing that is happening. It's a holistic organism. I'm Terry Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News, and we have the honor of having Dr. Keith Taylor of Harlem with us, and he's of Harlem in the world for sure. And he was on the front line during the 9/11 incident when two towers, the World Trade Center towers, came down. There was also other attacks, I believe, in Pennsylvania and on the Pentagon. And this all happened simultaneously. And I, as a New Yorker and as someone who was in Manhattan at the time, I really felt that this was the first time that we actually had war on our shores, maybe since the Civil War. And I felt like I understood maybe what people in the Middle East go through on a daily basis to some extent. And it's also was the marking of, for me, the world changing forever. I know that for at least 2 weeks, I, was kind of looking over my shoulder, listening to the news. And then 1 month after, there was an incident and they said that it was birds that flew in a plane and 200 people. Exactly 1 month after, a plane came down that was on the way to the Dominican Republic, and they started locking off the tunnels and the bridges. And, if you were not in Manhattan at that time, you were clear, and COVID made us clear that we're living on an island. And when they start locking down bridges and tunnels, the only other way out is on a boat, so that's a very significant thought and factor. And I just think it's also very significant that since that time, we've had lots of pandemics. And it's also very interesting. I do have to mention this. We have had Dr. Maulana Karenga, who is the creator of Kwanzaa, on the show many times. And the first time that he came on after the COVID, he said that people of color are fighting many pandemics: the pandemic of racism, health inequity, brilliant man, education. And then we've really been in a pandemic for 400 years. So I just thought that was a very significant factor. But what you mentioned, Dr. Taylor, in terms of the resilience of the human spirit, is that after all kinds of atrocities, the human spirit can heal to a degree and heal from the trauma, and that in itself, and still try to have life and joy. And I think that that is so very important. But if you could share with us, because I understand, Dr. Taylor, that you were on the front line, and we're going to go to the other topics because I know you're involved in the COVID initiatives as well. But if you could just share personally, what that was like for you, and also, what the impact was, because we know that it impacted so many people's health, and it's still impacting people's health. So it's very, very concerning. And it's also something that must be taught, I believe, in the schools, because it is a lest we not forget. The same way slavery is a lest we not forget, the Holocaust is a lest we not forget, the war in Vietnam is a lest we not forget. There are many things that we must not forget. And because it's recent history, it's very important, especially now, that young people who were not born at that time know what they're dealing with. That is the value of history and understanding oneself and the legacy. So if you would just speak on that, Dr. Taylor, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, certainly, if we do not learn from history, we are destined to repeat the same mistakes. And the attack that occurred, you mentioned the Civil War. There was Pearl Harbor and our entry into World War II.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that in terms of your historical prowess. Yes.
But how we I hope that's not me.
Yeah, that's not you.
Okay.
I apologize. I apologize profusely.
It's all right.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So the thing that we need to understand is that how we deal with the country's present, its past, and how we deal with the transparency of knowledge, of letting individuals know and understand what has occurred and why. It allows us to come up to better decision-making for the future. And so without understanding the history of the relationship between this country and those countries that we've been dealing with for many years, it is difficult to understand why they would attack. So if Americans have a better understanding of the country's history and its relationship to other countries, both the good and the bad, they can perhaps come up with better ways of dealing with the rest of the world, and to a certain extent, how they deal with Americans in such a way as to prevent future incidents. Oftentimes, people, just like groups or armies, they react out of something that they think is wrong, or that they've been wronged, and that they have not received the appropriate resolution. And so they're left with limited options. And when you get individuals that are extremists, they see violence as the way to get their message across, to change policy, to intimidate people and countries to bend to their will. So I think understanding that we need to be honest and transparent about our actions and what has occurred previously, that will allow for much clearer options in the future. We really want to prevent this type of thing from happening, whether it's foreign or domestic.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Taylor. I'm Terry Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News for those of you who are just tuning in. We are a new media platform. We also are, we have a new venture. We are putting out a weekly newsletter. And certainly there's a newsletter that went out today. And if you send in to harlemnetworknews@gmail.com or just, DM us and do all the other things on our Facebook, Instagram, and so on, we'll make sure that you are on our list for the newsletter. And certainly next week or at the end of this week, we will be doing an article that will focus on our guest for today and 911. And our guest, Dr. Keith Taylor. And because some people may just be joining, if you would just give us again, what your connection was or is with the 911. And I know you're being, celebrated and interviewed on everywhere, but if you would just share that and then segue, because it's extremely significant. President Biden has mentioned that they're going to release some documents, about September 11th, 2020. And that's after 20 years. And there's been a lot of pressure from the families to get that clarity. They need closure. And we also are just pulled out of Afghanistan, which is connected in a way. So if you could share that, because I think you can share it best. You're the scholar and have lived it. So thank you.
Thank you. I was in 2001, September 11th. I was a sergeant in the missing person squad. That's all right. And I was I responded to the World Trade Center just before the first tower went down. And so I spent the next till May 30th of 2002 at the medical examiner's office at the morgue, Manhattan morgue, supervising forensic teams, forensic investigators who were trying to identify the remains that were just found at ground zero. They brought them to us, and then we made a determination. I worked with a lot of wonderful people, and one of the lasting consequences of this incident has been the sickness and death of individuals that were, simply doing their job, or just happened to be in the vicinity of the area where it occurred, and they were exposed to toxins, and those toxins have affected their lives. And so I don't want to give the impression that this event was a very finite incident. It actually has had an impact not just on those who responded or those who lived in that area who were affected, but also on the soldiers that went on to defend their country, and some of them did not make it back, and that has lasted for 20 years.
Not to interrupt you, just so that our audience is clear and I'm clear, because there's so much that has happened, but what is the significance of Afghanistan to the 911? There was that connection, there was that thread, there was Osama bin Laden, a singular person. What can you give just a snapshot of that?
Sure.
Because it's important, as you said, to know our history, the principle of Sankofa, know the past, the present and the future.
Yes. The Afghanistan was a haven for Osama bin Laden to set up his terror networks throughout the world. And so it was there that this government realized that they needed to intercede, and that's what brought U.S. troops to Afghanistan. The investigation, apparently, there's information that is just being released or is about to be released within the next 6 months that talks about the role of another country, Saudi Arabia, of which the vast majority of the attackers were from. And so looking at that connection is going to be important, because at the time that the attack occurred, Saudi Arabia was described as an ally by the US government. And so what the geopolitical consequences of that will be discerned hopefully within the next 6 months, if this was an attack that was somehow helped by that Saudi Arabian government at that time, which would change, I think, the dynamics of the relationship, or at least assess blame properly, in terms of what the families of the victims are looking to get. They want the truth. They want accountability.
Yes,
I think that's what we all want.
The truth.
When we deal,
yes,
the truth. We want people who have wronged us to be held accountable for their actions. And so I think that's the real cause for this effort by the families of the victims, to find out what role that country had to this attack occurring and the loss of their loved ones.
Okay. Do you think, because I know that I'm Terry Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News, and we're a new media platform, but I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I know that after 911, there were many documentaries, news information programs. There were different theories as to exactly what happened. We do know that, and I don't have the exact number, that about 3,000 people perished. And in many instances, no bodies were found. They were incinerated. So this was a really horrific thing. I was sharing with you that I know Bellevue Hospital was one of those downtown hospitals, which is right near the city morgue. And the city morgue was set up and expanded. It wasn't just the one building that it is, because there was so much identifying that needed to happen, and just following up. And there were pictures across the wall of the Bellevue Hospital of people who were looking for their loved ones, most of who they never found. So it was so much that occurred. But when you say the truth, the truth is always complex. Even as President Biden said, it's not a straight line. We know that somebody was on a plane. We know that planes hit one tower and hit a second tower. We saw it live on television. We know that a plane went down in a field in, I believe, Pennsylvania. And we know that the Pentagon was hit. And we know all this happened in a short sequence of time. But I don't know if we know exactly who did it, exactly who was behind it, but we know that it happened. And I think what you shared, Dr. Taylor, in terms of what the accountability of a country, or how people out of the country may perceive Americans, and what would motivate people to, feel that they needed to counterattack or any of those things. And now there's been so much controversy in terms of pulling out of Afghanistan now. So if you could just segue to that and speak a little bit about that. We won't hold you because it's a complex thing. There's no yes, no short answer. So thank you.
Well, I think what is quite apparent is it's not easy to end a relationship that you've had for 20 years. And I think that all the horrible things that we've seen on the news about the consequences of not having that support there, that is the reality that we have to deal with. But the other reality of having a war and losing American lives indefinitely, that is a very, very significant issue for those in power to have to deal with. So as a leader, the president has to decide where he's going to and why he's going to have American lives as well as resources.
Yeah, resources. To say that.
So I think it was not a sudden decision that was made. I think this was discussed during the campaign trail, but I am not really in a position to determine how well or how poorly the evacuation occurred.
Yes.
That I don't have enough information.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And I was going to share that. I'm Terry Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News, and I have with us Dr. Keith Taylor, who was a pivotal person with the NYPD Detectives Unit in recovering, remains during 9/11. And no, it's not a simple answer. And I concur with you in terms of having enough information to determine what should and shouldn't happen. However, here at Harlem Network News, we want everyone to have as much information as we can. We know we're not going to have it all, but I think especially during these times, and I think COVID has really taken the scab off the wound in terms of a lot of things, racial inequities and disparities and all kinds of things. So I think it's very important that we stay vigilant, we have as much information as we can, and that we also exercise our rights, to vote, and that we choose wisely, and we know that we're not disconnected from what's happening around us because it's impacting us. So I think that's critical. And I think that's a good segue, Dr. Taylor, because I know that you also have been involved in terms of some of the COVID initiatives. So if you would share a little bit about that, we have, a little bit more time. I don't want to hold you. We are definitely going to have you back because wealth of knowledge. And I can feel your calm and your reserve and I'm feeling that through the Zoom. And I think in order to do the things that you've done and still be able to sit here and smile is huge. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And I just wanted to mention that differences between back then and now. Of course, the obvious one is that we're dealing with a man-made, a naturally occurring a disease, as opposed to an attack by people. But we didn't have information available to us that, and even disinformation and misinformation that has created this environment where the competing of ideas about truth, about facts rather, is I think it is a bit concerning, because without having a clear understanding of what is a verified source of information, trusted source of information, by muddling and confounding trusted sources of information with, I think they call it fake news, by equivocating them, then we go into a realm where there's a lot of distrust of basic governance and basic types of help that the government gives. So that is 20 years ago, we're trying to figure out how to make the government address issues of terrorism in a national way, in a different way, especially with the use of intelligence communities in a much more cohesive manner. Now we are dealing with a pandemic where we have Americans who are dying needlessly because of their concern that the information that they're being given by official venues is not correct. That distrust is costing lives, and so when I volunteered to go on mission, I didn't know it was going to be a year, but in March 2020, I went upstate to Camp Smith and worked with the State Guard, which supports the National Guard. And so we worked as a team, joint task force for the state of New York on Operation COVID-19. And so when you saw the folks in uniform, they looked like they were in the Army. They were actually in the National Guard or the New York Guard, that were delivering supplies, that were getting masks to people, getting sanitizer. These were things a year ago, which are very short supply. You couldn't buy it for any price. And there was a lot of fear, a lot of not trusting what was coming from the government, was coming from the scientists, that the political motivations or ideological motivations were at the forefront of the decision making of these government agencies. So I think we have to, in not just in retrospect, because we're still dealing with the pandemic now,
Yeah.
but I think that we have to really rely on some basic facts and truths and governance, and use that, the science, to help us come to appropriate conclusions about what to do, how to open up society, how to get kids back in school, how to deal with the populations in our country that are more susceptible to getting this disease, how to deal with vaccines, and how to deal with each other. There are some, and I'm talking a lot, but there are
No,
some.
what you're saying is extremely important. This is Dr. Keith Taylor, and he's our guest today on Harlem Network News. Thank you.
There are some, not just medical issues that we have to deal with. We also have to deal with the psychological effects of all the things that we've been through together that have affected us in different ways. And what I see, not just in a rise of violent actions that occur and are reported on the news media, but just in terms of how people deal with each other individually, which is different than previously. We have, by being isolated for such a long period of time, it's affected our ability to socially to communicate with each other in a way that is it's different than what it's been in the past. Let's put it that way. And so we have to really be attuned to that and make certain that, again, going back to looking after one another, taking care of each other, and making certain that if someone is exhibiting real distress, that we help them get better, as opposed to simply, try to punish, and that we work with individuals to help them get better.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Keith Taylor, for sharing all of that. And if you would just share a little bit, and I know there's no little bit, we're going to wrap it up, but if you would share a little bit about what your journey, what did you have to do to get to become head of the detectives that were in the forensic unit? Did you also have a military background, a National Guard background? I also know that most recently you did run for city council in the our district community board 9, and you're part of the community board 10. So I know that you're very, very involved in the community. And I also know that I believe you're a professor at John Jay. But if you would just share a little bit about the journey. I know that you are from Harlem. I don't know if you were born in Harlem, but how did you get from point A to point B? And how do you stay where you are and keep growing and helping and experiencing? Because I think that's very significant. And especially as we're in this new norm, it's very important for particularly young people, because I know that I had the privilege of growing up in the 50s, which was kind of after World War II, and a lot of things happened, TV, color TV, freezers, so it was a time of calm until we got to the 60s, and actually me witnessing 3 assassinations in my teens, from President Kennedy to his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, for actually Dr. Martin Luther King, and El-Haj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X. So, I mean, been a journey of life, but I think it's always been a journey of life. If we look at our ancestors that came across the Middle Passage, it's always been a journey of life. So if you could just share how you got from A to Z, because I think it's helpful and more helpful to young people because we never had the experience of not being able to go to school, except, in the South, we couldn't go to school and we were maybe in a one-room schoolhouse, but this is a whole nother kind of thing. And as my daughter, who's sort of in different fields, has shared, that we really are in a technological revolution. This is a technology revolution. We had the Industrial Revolution. This is a technology revolution. So we're in a different space. So thank you.
Yes, I would say, my relationship with Harlem has been a love affair, not just because of my family's history, but I grew up in upstate. My mother divorced my father and remarried my stepfather, and his family had a summer resort called King's Lodge, which was
I'm familiar.
It was one of the destinations in that book, The Green Book.
Right.
It was started in 1937.
Wow.
Because it wasn't the only one. There were about 20 during the heyday of the Black resorts in the Catskills. But it was started in 1937 to allow African Americans to have a place of their own to go to, and it was in existence from 1937 to 2001. That's where I grew up, and during the summer months when it was open, we would have incredible speakers come talk to groups that, especially the National Black Holistic Society, about various issues and concerns for the African American community. And so the cultural, political, economic, Charles Bell was one of the speakers during one of the law professor from Harvard. There were you mentioned Malcolm X. Betty Shabazz was one of the guests that used to come up. Maya Angelou spoke up at the lodge. And it had a really storied history. Ella Fitzgerald performed up there during the 40s. And
this is another movie and a book.
Exactly. It was
amazing. Going to
amazing.
King's Lodge, but I was a child and I think I knew some other family members. We can talk about that later.
Okay.
But but I'm just saying, every time that I speak to anyone, and not that I know the ins and outs of you, you always learn such a wealth more about the person, the history, the family. And a lot of our history is not documented. The Black Holistic Society, I'm not familiar.
The National Black Holistic Society, amazing group of individuals who are committed to making certain that the African experience in this country was an empowering one, not one whose legacy or story is one of simply pain and suffering, but acknowledging the past, getting the truth and the facts about the past was what they were about, and helping us understand our current conditions and how we could have a better future. And so that's the environment I grew up in as a young man. I went to Howard.
All right.
And came out, and my first job was with Harlem Dowling West Side Children's Services, which was the oldest African-American orphanage in I guess the country.
Wow.
They were burned down during the draft riots of 1863. Their building down in the village, but they relocated eventually up to the Teresa Hotel. on 125th and 7th, and that's where I worked for about 3 years. And then I joined the police department, and I wanted to sort of understand the thin blue line and what that world was about, and ended up making a career out of it. I stopped a bank robbery a few weeks out of getting out of the police academy, not by myself, but I stopped in
Right.
conjunction
Wow.
with and that really made me open my eyes and realize, hey, this is a real job. This is not just something you're trying out. And
Yes.
then I
Yeah.
went into undercover work for a number of years. I got promoted to sergeant, and I got chosen to go into internal affairs. I did that for a few years, doing integrity testing work. And then I got into the detective bureau. And then that 18-month period when I was in missing persons squad, that's when 9/11 occurred. And then I went to the police commissioner's office, his management and policy analysis unit, dealing with various strategies, police strategies that they had to address. One of my projects was the changing from wooden batons to expandable batons. And so I was happy to see a modernization of the police force occur,
Beautiful.
for which I'll talk to you about it later on, but it
So
was
much.
important. It was important for changes to take place in the department. I then went into the emergency service unit, which is a SWAT/heavy rescue team. So they're the people who the police department calls when they are in trouble. Just like civilians call 911 for the police, well, the police call the emergency service unit to deal with every and any kind of situation. And within that unit, there's a special unit that deals with weapons of mass destruction, and that's where I spent a number of years, and that's
Wow.
that's why I got the scholarship to Naval Post Grad School to get
Beautiful.
the second master's in national security studies. I had during this time period, I'd gotten my master's in sociology from City College, and then gotten my doctorate from Columbia University in education.
Wow.
And I then
you are such a learned man, a learned Harlem man, and just how many greats have come out of our Howard University. So
oh my goodness, yeah,
that's a whole nother
very, very proud of Howard.
whole other conversation. Our vice president, blessings and rest in power to Chadwick Boseman. We just celebrated the
yes, that's
first
right.
anniversary of his death, so a lot.
Yeah, and so I after the emergency service unit, I retired, and I retired into an assistant commissioner position with the Department of Corrections in charge of their gang intelligence initiatives, and started a number of units, including a evidence collection unit and a social media team, and a number of other different initiatives to help modernize that area for the Department of Corrections, because they were dealing with some, and still are dealing with some very, very difficult
thank you.
issues.
Like I said, the more you speak, the more we know, and knowledge is power, and certainly this is very important, and we all need to be as involved as we can. And a tribute and kudos to you for just continuing to learn, continuing the educational process to be able to help. And I think that that is a valued lesson for our young people. So I'm going to fast forward. What are you doing right now? And what's coming up next? And if you'd like to just have some closing remarks, because obviously this is a robust discussion, and we thank you for coming on this Sunday and this Labor Day weekend to really talk. But I thought it was very important. I'm Terry Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News. I thought it was extremely important to have you on prior to a 911, just because of your involvement. So thank you.
Terry, thank you. And I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about the World Trade Center attack and these issues that we're dealing with. I would, I teach at John Jay, And I talk to young people about being open to accepting opportunities in whatever realm they are, because that can positively affect your life in other ways. Concurrently to the stuff I was doing professionally, I was also involved in my block association, been president for the last 15 years, and also working on the community board, doing various issues to help Harlem. One of
Yes.
the things that just happened was we recently got approved, we meaning the Block Association and all the individuals and organizations that help to push a new historic landmark district in central Harlem, something that had been we'd been working on for many years. And so I was very proud to be involved with that, because the preservation of our community is a part of how we're going to be able to remain here culturally. If the places that are significant for the Harlem Renaissance get torn down, then Harlem becomes simply another neighborhood in Manhattan and not
Yeah.
what the Mecca that it is
Right.
known for.
Mhm.
So, getting the city approval as a landmark district was important. We also got federal and state. And so those opportunities to do things to help your community as well as your professional career choice, it's important to be open to them and to be willing to give of yourself.
Mhm.
Do the best you can in whatever endeavor you choose to build a career in, but also consider those who are not as fortunate, consider those who have not been given enough, the same types of opportunities that you have, and use that to drive your volunteerism efforts, so that you are helping people not just by being a good professional once you're out of college, but also once you are actually out in the community as an adult. Helping people is something that should not be foreign to everyone, because I think we are going to really need to rely on each other as we deal with these future crises. We're going to have financial crises and increasingly difficult weather disasters, and I don't know what's going to happen regarding, I don't think anybody knows regarding the pandemic or what the
Right.
next
Yes.
pandemic type
Yeah,
of thing
absolutely.
may be.
Absolutely.
So,
We have learned to be fluid and to adjust to the time and the moment and to push through.
and really important, look after each other, take care of folks,
Mhm.
not attack them, because ultimately we're all we got. That's
Okay.
something I picked up at Rikers. We're all we
Okay.
got.
We're all we got. Well, thank you, Dr. Taylor. And one of our many slogans is "It takes a village," and then
Hmm.
forward ever, backward never. And
Yes.
then, of course, after our acclaimed Harlem author, James Baldwin, so goes Harlem, so goes the world. So
Yep.
we're in great leadership, all eyes on Harlem. So what we do matters, and Harlem, vote, because your life does depend on it. There's voter suppression everywhere. And in New York City, in the primaries, only 28% of the whole city voted. So we have some work to do, but I'm just going to thank you. And for those of you who are listening, I will close with, this is Harlem Network News. I'm Terry Wisdom. Harlem Network News is a new media platform. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're even on Clubhouse. We're running some TikToks because we're trying to reach everyone. HarlemNetworkNews.com, as well as a newsletter that comes out weekly, in some instances, if necessary, twice a week, because there's so much happening. But please reach out. Of course, we need your support. We need your funding monetarily. We're voice and drumbeat of Harlem, but we also need your information and your stories. If something's happening on your block, or you want to write an article, or there's an event that's coming up that you think is important, please share that with us. We do have sponsorships for businesses. One of our sponsors has been New Harlem Coffee. You can go to newharlemcoffee.com. And when you purchase some coffee, that helps to keep us on the air. So we're working at it. And we look for all the support that we can get. We are community-based. So thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. And keep us posted with everything 911. And I will certainly get this article out about you and anything else that anyone needs to know as we approach September 11th. And
Thank you so much, Terry.
okay, thank you, Dr. Taylor. And it's an honor and a pleasure to have learned so much. So have a great.
I enjoy our talks always.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And good luck with all. Blessings and prayers for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.